Welcome back to the show. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. You're with Talk TV. Now, pro-Palestine protesters have clashed with police yet again on their latest London march, with an even bigger march planned this coming Saturday. Also, developments in the Middle East. Joining me now to discuss all of that is Natasha Hausdorff. She's a barrister and director of UK Lawyers for Israel. Good morning to you.
Good morning, Julia.
Thank you very much indeed. Obviously, there's lots of developments happening in and around Gaza. We'll come to those. But first up, just in terms of what's been happening in the UK, yet again, more protests in the streets, in particular in London, protests which did lead to some clashes with police, some unpleasant scenes. Yet again, more chanting and placards being held, not by everybody, completely accept that there'll be people in those marches genuinely concerned about the plight of children and other innocent civilians in Gaza, but also some, let's face it, wrong-uns who are out on the streets to intimidate. There's some calls, even from Lord Walney, the former Labour MP John Woodcock. He's now the government's independent advisor on political violence and disruption, saying that he thinks that these protesters should have to pay for their own policing. Would you agree with that?
Well, unfortunately, I think the negative elements that you've referenced have apparently been encouraged by the abject failure of the Metropolitan Police in particular to do their job for the last 3 months now, which seems to have encouraged further lawlessness and continues to allow a free pass for terror support on the streets. The difficulty, I think, with the proposals for payment, apart from practically how one goes about enforcing those, is that it seems to be distracting from that failure of policing. What we really need to be seeing is getting to grips with the criminal conduct and seeing that that is properly addressed by the police and then thereafter by the Crown Prosecution Service. I think that's the only way to deal with, as you say, the negative elements of these protests. Now, of course, obstructing a highway, as we saw over the weekend, the obstruction of Westminster Bridge can be a criminal offence. In practice, it's a balancing exercise against the right to protest. But the police seem to have vacated the field on these difficult issues. And when we're seeing clear support for Hamas in certain aspects of these marches and breaches of the Public Order Act and the Terrorism Act and the failure to act on them, that's clearly encouraging further lawlessness.
Yeah, I mean, that's the issue, isn't it? There'll be plenty who are marching perfectly legally, perfectly reasonably, but it's possible to have a march saying you're very concerned about this issue without intimidating people, without, again, blocking Westminster Bridge. I mean, I can remember all the fuss over Westminster Bridge being blocked by the eco-activists, and the public basically said, we've had enough. And the police didn't act until the public said, we have had enough. A lot of people are perhaps just sort of turning a blind eye to this now, but unfortunately, I mean, certainly I live in North London, large Jewish community, they can't turn a blind eye to it because they do feel the intimidation and still telling their children, don't want you to go into town on a Saturday because I can't be guaranteeing your safety. That is unacceptable in a democracy.
Well, it's also unacceptable how much public money has been wasted on this situation. Reports of 28,000 police shifts, which are, of course, 8 hours in length, figures anywhere between 17 to 20 million. That's not possible to recoup from the organisations that are promoting these protests, not least because they've been refusing to cooperate with the police as they refused to indicate to the police the proposed route on Saturday. And so the latest proposals
to do, when that's part of the right of legal protest.
And otherwise, gatherings of that nature, especially if they're blocking the highway, are very likely to be unlawful. But the idea that we can simply charge the organisers for this, practically, I think, of course, it's a very different story to the arrangements that police engage with football clubs, for example, where there is a mutual agreement to the effect of contribution to additional policing numbers and expense. Here, I think this proposal is being brought to distract the public from the real failures, which is the failure to enforce the law and where the law is being broken in these marches to arrest and prosecute appropriately.
Yeah, indeed, and enabling those who are there for the right reasons and good reasons to be able to carry on their lawful, peaceful process as well. Well, let's talk about what is going on, of course, in Israel, in Gaza, and around the Middle East. We had the Israeli Defense Forces saying they have destroyed Hamas as a fighting force in North Gaza. Some talk, though, that they could still be in Gaza for, many months to come. Antony Blinken, the US Secretary of State, of course, still on his tour around the Middle East, trying to prevent this sort of becoming a bigger, wider conflagration with what's going on with Hezbollah to the north of Israel, but also, of course, in the Red Sea with the Houthi rebels and their attacks on shipping as well. We're 3 months and 1 day in from the 7th of October massacre. The IDF claim they've killed 8,000 Hamas fighters, but there are 30,000 estimated Hamas fighters. There's a very long road ahead. I mean, how many more civilians in Gaza are going to die?
Well, the IDF have confirmed now that 11 out of the 12 battalion areas in the north have been taken out of commission, and more than 8,000 Hamas terrorists have been eliminated. But that does not mean, of course, that every terrorist in the north has been dealt with. It does mean, though, that Hamas, we're told, has no real organizational capability to conduct significant operations there. So it cannot run logistics or coordinate firing or exercise complex maneuvers. And it doesn't have control above ground level. But of course, due to the elaborate tunnels, the underground infrastructure, I think it's too soon to say that Hamas has been destroyed in the north. And the IDF has indicated that it is working to replicate its achievements in the north, in the central and south of Gaza, but it is doing so at a much slower pace, no doubt because of international and especially US pressure. But I think it's significant that every day we are seeing more terrorists surrender. There are more tunnels, weapons caches and manufacturing plants being discovered. And so progress is being made alongside the unprecedented measures to minimize civilian casualties that the IDF are taking. And we're seeing a lot of intelligence-driven operations. So, for example, in relation to the Jabalia battalion, a systematic attack on the chain of command, right through from battalion level to company level, which was based on intelligence from different sources. And so far as Blinken's, actually, perhaps before we move to Blinken's visit in particular, it's worth just highlighting to your viewers, I've been seeing in the break and in the course of our discussion, renewed air raid sirens across the north of Israel. A massive attack, it seems now, aircraft infiltration, which usually
From
means
Hezbollah.
drone strikes. So the northern border of Israel is also under constant attack from Hezbollah as they operate in the south of Lebanon. And that's pretty significant when we come to assess Biden's visit, his press conference last night in Qatar, in which he focused on regional involvement and a commitment to ensure that the conflict doesn't expand. But in light of the abject failure of the region and the world to ensure that Hezbollah complied with the commitments after the Lebanon war of 2006, internationally approved commitments that there would be no Hezbollah forces below the Litani River, so the so-called Blue Line. Israel doesn't seem to be able to rely on international assurances for its
indeed, we see again and again the United Nations, vote after vote, criticising Israel again. Israel could stop firing, could stop all the operations in Gaza. I know we talk about Lebanon there, but it could stop all the operations in Gaza today if they wanted. But equally, Hamas could stop all of their operations. They could hand back what we thought around 130 innocent hostages, including children, women, and elderly as well. They could hand those people back. They could lay down their weapons. They could discuss a two-state solution, but they don't want that. When people call on Israel to stop their bombardment, it's amazing how often they're not also calling on Hamas to stop what they're doing.
Julia, if I might disagree with you on that point. I don't think that Israel is in a position to stop its military operation because, quite apart from the international discourse on this, the Israeli government, democratically elected, has a responsibility first and foremost to protect its citizens.
Oh yes, I completely agree on that. Listen, I'm going to have to leave it there, but I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to us again. Natasha Hausdorff, barrister and director of UK Lawyers for Israel.